It's another ThyGap Thursday. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the ThyGap podcast. My name is Bogus Noog, and Brute was not able to join us today. And, as his partner, I just like to say, wherever he is, I hope he is suffering. That very thought helps me sleep at night with a smile on my face. But this week, we are doing why we say it's not easy. We've made about 27 episodes in the It's Not Easy series so far, and all of them have been well received. We've had more listeners tuning in, by our standards, I mean, of course. And, I want to say thank you to all of you who have been listening to the podcast. We, of course, would love to hear back from you about, your first and last name, your mother's maiden name, etc. But also, where do you listen to the podcast? When do you listen to it? And have you done your due diligence of sharing it with a friend? Stuff like that. But let me give you a very quick overview of what we're going to go through in this episode. So firstly, why are we making these It's Not Easy episodes in the first place? What is the brown pill? What are the three aspects of ancient Indian thought? David Lynch, Ayahuasca, Psilocybin Mushrooms, 48 laws of power, and so much more. Just hit that follow button so you can come back to this later if, you're busy right now. All right, so let's get into it. Why do we make these It's Not Easy episodes in the first place? Like I said, we've made 27 of them so far, and you better believe there's quite a lot more in the pipeline. But when you look at all of those topics, where we keep hammering on it's not easy, I was kind of thinking that we've done 27 of them, but I don't remember setting up a proper context as to why we were doing that in the first place, or what, as a listener, what you would have to make of it all. And so I thought 27 down the road, probably this is a good time to just take a small break and revisit that context or revisit that overarching reason. Because I can sort of see how if someone keeps hammering on, oh, this thing is not easy, that important thing is not easy, that other thing that you were thinking was important, that's not easy as well. It stands to reason why to some folks it might come off as a black pill, but it's not. It's not at all that. So let me define these pills in the first place, just in case for the uninitiated. There's all different kinds of pills, in the internet lingo. There's a black pill, there's a white pill, there's a blue pill, and there's a red pill. Of course, if you've watched The Matrix, you're pretty familiar with what the red and blue pills signify. This is the choice that Morpheus gives Neo. You take the blue pill and you go back, wake up in your bed, live your life just as blindly but comfortably as you were doing, paying no attention to what the reality is. Or you take the red pill and then I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. So in a sense, the significance was the blue pill was the easy way out and the red pill was the opposite. So the red pill is kind of like a disillusionment. You thought things were a certain way, but in reality, they end up being something else altogether. So it causes you to stumble. It causes you some discomfort. But one aspect of the red pill that goes unmentioned sort of is there is sort of a duality going on in the red pill as well, which is you thought it was X, but it's actually Y. So there is sort of a conclusive nature to the red pill. When they say you thought it was X, but it's actually Y, it's like substituting Y substitutes X now. And you just have to come to terms with Y. And the implication is that your job's done. A black pill, of course, is something completely hopeless, bleak. And a white pill is the opposite of that. It's actually full of hope. If you are a deeply cynical sort of person and if you ran into some sort of trouble and you come across a good Samaritan, who unbeknownst to you, you complete strangers, but you're taken aback by how much that person goes out of their way to help you out. And that sort of is like an example for a white pill where you feel like some faith in humanity, has been restored there, which you never had. So what I'm proposing here is that while it's not easy can come off as a black pill, it's definitely not that. It's definitely not a white pill either, because it's in the meaning of the term itself. It's not easy. So that means there is discomfort involved. There is going to be some effort involved. So it's not really a white pill. It's not all sunshine and butterflies. It's obviously not a blue pill because you're not choosing to go back to sleep, metaphorically speaking. And it's not a red pill either because, like I said, the red pill tends to have a conclusive nature to it. There's an implication of a solution being offered, even though the journey to that solution itself is not a comfortable or a convenient one for you. So I like to think of It's Not Easy as more of a brown pill. It's a brand new color, but it matches. Hey. Now let me explain why and what I mean by that. We need to consider ancient Indian thought as an example. Why? Because the nature of that thought process is very close to what I mean by a brown pill, which is there's no easy solutions. You just get a direction and a shovel to wade through the shit by yourself. That's about it. If you look at ancient Indian thought and how it operates, for ease of understanding, we can say there are three aspects to it. One, there's a high barrier of entry. Two, it is largely inconclusive. And three, it is highly interconnected. I'm talking about the nature of it from a high-level overview. So let's look at these three aspects a little closely. All right, so the first thing is a high barrier of entry. What do I mean by that? I mean, not a lot of people take to it so easily. And the reasons for that is, one of the reasons is it is highly scientific in its approach. And let's not confuse science with scientific. By a scientific approach or a scientific method, I mean that involves a process of basically cutting down all sorts of bullshit, superfluous bullshit, to get as close to the truth as possible. And for the sake of this episode, let's consider that a very highly simplified sort of definition. But hey, if you want to go deeper than that, then you can, of course, look it up online, the scientific method, and you can see the whole process, what that involves. But basically, at the end of the day, it takes effort. It's also highly nuanced. I'm coming back to the ancient Indian thought here. Apart from being highly scientific in its approach, it is also highly nuanced. It forces you to kind of confront, a lot of gray areas, which frankly not only takes effort, but it's also quite uncomfortable. And these days, you can find many people, willing to sit through a Pink Floyd song, for example, which is about 6.5 minutes long, and there's barely any lyrics. So you can see in terms of focus and effort or concentration required, this is, a higher barrier of entry than most people are used to. The second point that I mentioned was it's largely inconclusive, the nature of ancient Indian thought. Now, any self-help book that you take off the shelf, the Western style of self-help books, obviously you may have noticed it follows certain marketing tactics like 7 habits of highly effective people, 4 P's of success, 48 laws of power, 35 ways to get rid of your wife, so on and so forth. And it's no secret that those kind of marketing tactics are also included in this podcast. But that's largely a left brain way of thinking, which favors purely reason and logic, and that sort of a thought process can only breathe easy when you reach solutions or conclusions. There's value in that. But things like ambiguity and inconclusivity, if that's a word, those things are rejected and, even feared deep down. But this kind of, prioritization of pure reason and logic over and above everything else, it doesn't really work for all kinds of problems. Jiddu Krishnamurti has a quote, it's one of my favorites, and I'm going to paraphrase that. He basically said, the highest form of intelligence is to observe without evaluating. And how I interpret that is, first of all, when he says the highest form of intelligence, I interpret that to mean wisdom. And to observe without evaluating, I interpret that to mean without jumping to a conclusion right away, without deciding right away, and just leaving it hanging there, without concluding whether you think of it one way or the other, whether you like it or not, whether you favor it or not. Just leave it inconclusive. Let it hang in limbo. Now, that's something that's easy to say than it is to actually do. Because, like I said, the left brain way of thinking is not going to be very comfortable with that notion. Now, the ancient Indian thought, again, it puts a lot of emphasis over humility and wisdom. And those traits are actually extremely important to realize that in the end, we really know nothing. We'll probably never have all the answers. And we probably were never meant to have all the answers. But we do have the freedom to entertain our own theories and pursue that direction to either verify or validate those theories, the scientific approach. In many of my travels in India, especially in the mountains, this has happened multiple times with me. I'm not sure if you have come across this as well. You generally ask for directions and the local guy goes, oh yeah, it's just over there. Just keep following this road. Just go that way. And then you ask, okay, but, is it near or is it far? Like, how close am I? And it says, yeah, you're pretty near. Yeah, you just keep following this road and you'll get there. And initially, I always took that at face value because, you can't jump to conclusion if it happens only once to you because every other time you're encountering different people. But it took me a while to understand that when they say near, when they say it's nearby, it's near for him. Near for me is from the hall to the kitchen. So obviously, in the end, this always became like a trick, to get to where actually I was trying to get to. And so in a similar sense, we're kind of given a direction and that's about it. It's almost as if, they're saying, keep going that way and see where it takes you, no spoilers. And movie buffs, are all too familiar with the joy and frustration of watching David Lynch films. He never explains, but it takes you to feelings and sensations that sometimes they're vaguely familiar, but most of the time they're just not easy. And I highly recommend all seasons of Twin Peaks, a TV show. Definitely check it out. The third aspect I mentioned about the nature of ancient Indian thought is that it's highly interconnected. And these connections are actually far more denser than we can easily understand or appreciate. We'll come across many topics or subjects, just like the It's Not Easy topics that you find of this podcast. But it takes a while to understand that in the end, all these dots are actually connected. And not only that, we don't even get easy instructions on how to connect them. Everything in this universe is interconnected and nothing exists in isolation. Now, that is just a sentence. But it's also a truth buried so deep that just saying it and memorizing it, it does nothing. It actually takes time to sink to the bone. And when that happens, what that really looks like is you might find, things like problem solving in day-to-day life, that becomes easier. Creative blocks that you have, they tend to get cleared up quickly. Making plans and strategies, that becomes easier. And not only that, but your plans and strategies actually end up, working great for you. They actually end up being on point. But like I said, it's an open secret, this interconnectedness. But the thing about open secrets is the reason why there's no problem about it being open is because no one would easily understand what it means. So it's not really easy. Like I said, it's just a sentence, but it takes time and it takes some effort to actually let that sink to your bone, to actually get what it means, to use it into application. And so I want to just suggest a few starting points that maybe help if someone is so inclined, And these are not boring, actually pretty fascinating. The first thing is there's a microbiologist called Paul Stamets, and he's one of the more famous guys that specializes in the study of mushrooms and fungi. And he's appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast multiple times. And I'd recommend maybe the first appearance because obviously he's going to start from scratch there and it's going to fill in a lot of context. The way he talks about fungi, mushrooms, and the way he explains the fungal network, the key word being network, connections, that would be a great starter episode. He also has some really crazy stories about how, his life changed and the main turning point in his life from where he actually went deep into studying fungi was actually him back in college being stoned on mushrooms up on a tree and that tree gets hit by lightning, So it's a must-watch episode, according to me. And there's fascinating stuff about mushrooms and fungi itself. But then the fungi network is what clues you into that interconnected nature of things. So that's one. The second possible source to pursue or to research on is, I came across several encounters of people on either ayahuasca or even psilocybin mushrooms. And when they recount their experiences, right, it's one of the things that is common, or many of them mention, is that they experience being absolutely one with their surroundings. What I mean by that is they experience being one and the same as the trees around them, as the people around them, and the animals around them. That sense of, separation between their bodies and other bodies, flora or fauna, that simply got dissolved. And they truly felt it, that kind of, oneness. So that also clues us into that interconnectedness. Nikola Tesla also referred to it, but in a different way. So, there's a connection between all the topics that we are touching upon in the It's Not Easy series, and even, right from the beginning, the kind of topics that we started covering. So you'll just have to stick around. And it doesn't work, if you start talking about the connections right off the bat, because you can't play a game of connect the dots without the dots being present in the first place, right? So in summation, or to summarize, It's Not Easy is actually not meant to be a downer. It's more meant to be a call of action. That's how we see it. It's meant to be more of a reminder for all of us. And the reminder is that nothing worthwhile in life, nothing of true value, ever comes easy. Nothing that we really, really want and also really, really need deep down is ever going to come easy. And then ultimately, we're also going to have fun and, most importantly, fulfillment in actually pursuing them, despite the fact that it's not easy. And it's a call to action, and it's a reminder to a point where instead of it's not easy sounding like a downer or sounding intimidating, it actually starts to attract our attention like a magnet. What do you guys think? Do you have any topics or traits that you think are not easy? Let us know, because we'd love to hear from you. On Twitter, we are at ThyGap. On Instagram, we are at _ThyGap. And our email is mindthygap@gmail.com. So we'd like you to stick around and learn along with us, because we are learning as well as to how all these dots connect. And ultimately, when you take a step back, what that map really looks like. And it's not going to be easy. ThyGap. Subscribe and share.